Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Hopefully, people will hop in and join us as they can. We are recording today's presentation, and we'll have the link to the recording available at some point in the near future. Good morning again. My name is Nancy Deveneaux. I'm now in month 3 of my position at Georgia State as Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. And today we're going to be talking about building a biosketch with SciENcv. It's really going to be focused around NIH biosketches, but the project ultimately will enable you to build biosketches for any federal agency that accepts certain formats. So let's get started. Let me get my slides moving here. Okay, not sure why the slides are not moving. Here we go. Okay. The ultimate goal in today's presentation is to learn how to use SciENcv documents to generate biosketches. But before we do that, we're going to have to look at a couple of other sources where the data for generating those biosketches is stored. Just a little brief history on how we got to this point. About 3 years ago, the Office of Science and Technology Policy out of the White House came forward with some research security information that generated new common forms, which other agencies, including NSF, began adopting in September of 2022, 2.5 years ago. NIH implementation, and I'm just updated my slide this week, was supposed to begin in May. But as you probably have heard, they are not doing that. Let me go back. Oops, sorry about that. They are not beginning that implementation until a little bit later. The go live is unknown for that, so we will just wait and see. The NIH process doesn't affect the biosketches and other support forms. Okay. So let's first take a brief overview of what the SciENcv system is. It stands for the Science Experts Network Curriculum Vitae. It's really a researcher profile system for all individuals who apply for, receive, and are associated with research grants or investments from federal agencies. What it does is to gather and compile information on expertise, employment, education, and professional accomplishments, and then facilitate the production of proposal and report documents in agency-specific formats. So here's a big picture of how this really works. On the left-hand side, you see the inputs. These are researcher-owned data sources, things like your ERA Commons profile, your ORCID ID, your NCBI bibliography, and other data sources that you might incorporate into your profile. Those all go into a big bucket. You can think of it as the data repository. And then from that bucket, we can pull out specific items to generate agency-specific biosketches. Currently, it also allows production of an NSF current and pending support document with a lot of manual entries, as we'll see a little bit later on. The NIH other support is also forthcoming. You can currently use it to create an NIH biosketch, but you actually have to produce it on the current NIH forms. The NIH other support is not currently working for reasons that we'll talk about a little bit later on in terms of the complexity of the data. So if we think of our bucket, we have a large bucket composed of data sets, a little bit smaller buckets. We've again got your ERA Commons bucket and the content that contains. The ORCID ID has certain information stored in it and can have other information. You can create an NCBI bibliography to store publications and other products. And then finally, some additional content can be stored in the data repository that can be used for your personal statement. It could include things like professional honors, as well as additional grant information stored there that will all populate certain sections of the NSF or NIH biosketches in the proper format and in the proper order. Again, the ERA Commons bucket populates the header on the form. The ORCID ID can provide additional information. Most people just keep their highest degree in the form. And I see Monica's got a hand up. You want to ask your question, Monica? Dan's got a hand up. Are you all able to open your audio? Let's see. If you have questions, I don't know if Marcus is still on and he can help. Do you guys have questions you can put in the chat? There we go. Oh, I froze. Okay. I froze. Not sure why that was. Questions will go in the Q&A, not chat. Thank you. That's how we've set it up. Yes, so for attendees, no audio, but please use the Q&A if you have a question. And do raise up your hand or alert me in some way if my audio video froze. Okay, are we good to go now, Monica? Yes, no? Okay. Well, we'll continue from here with the NCBI bibliography providing additional information, especially with as it relates to any publications that are in PubMed. We'll talk about that. And then finally, there's some additional content that we can pull in again to the personal statement and to our contributions to science as we choose. Okay. Just a sidebar, if you've had an NCBI account in the past and you used to log in using a screen like this, that standalone login was sunsetted in 2021. So if you've had it but haven't used it in a while, you can still land on that page, but it's going to redirect you to log in via your ERA Commons profile, your ORCID ID, login.gov, and there are several other ways that you can log in, as we're just about to take a look at. So one of the first things that you're going to need to do, because you've got to fill up those buckets in order to have the data for the SciENcv form, is to create a MyNCBI record. And the URL for signing up for an account is shown on this screen. You can sign on using one of several different account options. For people that are already doing NIH activity, you'll have an ERA Commons account. Students may have a Google account. You can also log in via your ORCID or login.gov accounts or Microsoft, any one of those. What's very interesting here is that if you are an NSF person, the research.gov is sometimes used, but I didn't see that under the more sign-on options. So if you want to create a new account, you can do that. Or if you already have an account, you're good to go. One of the things that you may want to do in your NCBI account is to put a backup email on that, just in case you change institutions and lose access to one of the email accounts. Here you can see that I've set it up to create it linked to my Gmail, but it doesn't have to be that way. My main account is tied to my GSU account now. So you're going to select create a new account and click the continue button at the bottom and just follow the prompts on the screen to set up your account. Once you've set up the account, you'll be able to start populating your record. NCBI stands for the National Center for Biotechnology Information. It's a unit within the National Library of Medicine at the National Institutes of Health. So you're going to see a lot of NIH flavor all over this, but it is your access point to search NCBI databases if you're doing research. It allows you also to store your own bibliography. It's the point of access for SciENcv, although you can go directly, and other content can be included on this page. At the top screen, you're going to see that there's a customize this page option, and you can move things around. You can add modules. You can remove those that you're not using regularly. There's a video overview if you want to see a little bit more about how that's done, and the help function is also here. Now, for our purposes, we are mainly going to focus on, for the NCBI, focusing on the bibliography and the SciENcv access that I've got highlighted on these two sections. Once you've created your MyNCBI account, you're going to need to link it to the other accounts that are going to be used to provide the data. So at the very top corner of your MyNCB screen, you're going to see a profile link with whichever email you've used to set up that particular account. Log into your account and click the profile link. Once you've opened the profile, you will choose the account settings, and this is where you go to link your account to your ERA Commons or your ORCID ID. And if you don't have any linked initially, you can click Add Account, and then it pops up with ways to enter your account, log into your account, scroll to your account, but ultimately it's also going to require the secure access to that account. So if you have a research.gov account, you can add that here by going through all of the normal processes that one would do to access your research.gov account. So once you've linked those, they are then the data that's in those accounts is accessible for your SciENcv Biosketch creation. If they're not linked, then SciENcv doesn't have any of that information, and it's really little more than a manual re-entry of all of that data. So this is a great tool for reusing data that you've already got. Now, in the ORCID ID, which you definitely recommend linking an ORCID ID, creating one and linking it, we can talk about how to set that up. All of the sections in the ORCID ID map to various parts of a Biosketch. So populating your ORCID ID, great idea. ORCID stands for Open Research and Contributor ID. I mean, it's a global nonprofit supported by a lot of member organizations, including federal agencies. So when you look at that, it's like most of them have signed on to this and have ways to incorporate your federal Biosketch information in the systems. The employment section will go to populate your section B on an NSF Biosketch on positions. The education and qualifications section in ORCID is going to populate part of the header in an NIH or NSF Biosketch where you list your degrees. Now, it'll allow them to be populated in the correct order, whether chronological or reverse chronological order, as that particular agency requires. But it pulls that data from the education and qualification section. Professional activities, as you see here, are positions or memberships, activities, prizes, things of that sort. For those that are doing NSF, this could be used to populate the synergistic activities document. Synergistic activities used to be a section within the Biosketch. That has changed in recent years. It's now a standalone document, but the requirements are the same. So having that in here and having a menu of 10 to 12 items where you then choose the 5 or whatever designated number are most appropriate for a certain biosketch is a great tool. Then you don't have to rekey them every time or go find that old version and re-enter the data. The funding part, it provides a framework to some degree for the other support or the NSF current and pending support documents that go with proposals. The limitation currently on the way that ORCID is set up is that it doesn't capture sufficient detail for those documents. If you've done an NSF current and pending, or if you've done an NIH other support, you know that you have to identify person months or effort on different projects. This doesn't allow you to capture that. What it does do is pull the grants in, and then you can manually populate that. I do believe that that's one of the reasons that NIH has delayed their launch of the SciENcv, because the other support part needs additional programming and detail in order to capture that and be fully useful and automated and not have to manually do that every time. Although, since those things change over time, you would have to update that periodically. And finally, at the bottom, you see a section called Works. That's your research outputs. This is particularly helpful for doing a proposal other than NIH, because with NIH, a lot of your publications are going to be able to pull in from directly out of MyNCBI in the PubMed linkage that is there. This one will allow you to pull in documents from other sources. It also allows you to do some manual entries, as we'll see in a moment, for things that are in press. If we take a closer look again at the funding section, the funding section, when you're adding a item in the funding section, you can either add it manually or you can search and link. Keep in mind that the search and link is only going to return awards that are in the federal system on which you were named in the agency data. So if you were a PI, a co-PI, or an MPI, your name will be there and it should pull you in. If it's a private foundation, it may or may not. In fact, most cases will not pull that. Other sources of funding will not be shown there. So that's when you would use the manual tool. And again, that's going to give you a more complete picture, and it can pull from the CV. The other limitation on the automated search, and I've seen this with other folks trying to pull NIH funding into their ORCID ID, is that it will sometimes not pull the full funding. It'll only pull the current year funding. So it might only show that the year is, April 1st of 2024 through March 31st of 2025, but that's really year 3 of 5 years of funding. And you can manually go in and change those dates and change the award numbers as you need to. Again, the limitation is that whichever option you use, neither one of them captures effort. And we know that that's going to be a piece needed for the other support document as well as for the NSF current and pending support. So you'll have to go in manually to your SciENcv documents when you get to that point and edit that. The Works tool in ORCID is a little bit more robust. Your Add button can search and link lots of different sources. You can also add manually, but if you have a PubMed ID for your presentations, if it's been entered in PubMed, as it should for public access, then just keep track of your PubMed ID, enter your PubMed ID, and it's going to populate with everything else that you need for the full publication. And so you would have already submitted it there. It should be there. Manual is useful, again, for those in-press publications. One of the things that, and we're going to see in a moment, there's a bibliography in MyNCBI that will allow automatic searching of PubMed and possibly convert those in press to published when they do come out. But that does not work like that in ORCID. It's a separate system. So you've got couple of different ways to keep your ORCID documents. And for all of the sections in ORCID, there's also a built-in help right in context. In this case, learn more about. How do I do that? Now, if you choose the search and link function instead of PubMed or one of the others that were listed on the previous screen, it actually gives you access, and I'm not going to show a screenshot of it, but there's 17 different databases or data sources that can be used to pull content into an ORCID ID. The types of choices include articles, books, data, and student publications. It also allows you to search geographically by either choosing global or choosing one of the 5 continents. The take-home message here is that if a citation is not in PubMed, pull it or enter it in ORCID ID to make it available for inclusion in your Biosketch. Otherwise, you're going to have to add it manually when you get over to the Biosketch, because it will not be here and you won't be able to pull it in. Okay, so let's assume now that we have populated all of our data sources that are needed for NCBI. We've completely filled out everything that we can do in ORCID. We're not necessarily going to use it for every Biosketch, but everything is there probably from the moment we, started our first professional positions. Once you're here, you are ready then to come back to the My NCBI homepage and go to the SciENcv section and choose the button that says click here to delegate, or click here to create a new CV. Now, I will talk a little bit more about delegated CVs. You can see here that Dr. Arias has delegated me as a user of her bibliography and her CV. And for those of you in the research administration realm, that's a really good thing to ask PIs to do so that you can then assist them in preparing those biosketches. And now we're ready to start thinking about a CV. Couple of things to do if you haven't already done it is under My Profile in SciENcv, you can edit your profile, confirm that your ORCID ID and your NSF ID are there. Your ERA Commons ID should be there automatically, but you can pull those in. The NSF ID is the research.gov ID. And if you're stuck at any point, you've also got help functions in the upper corner of the about, but also the how to use SciENcv is also showed there. And again, why is my ERA Commons not showing? Well, it's because I used my ERA Commons login to access my NCBI. So it knows who I am. It doesn't need to post that here. I don't need to add that. It's already got that. On the main page, then you're going to click the New Document button. A new document could be anything. It could be the CV. When NIH launches it, it's going to be your other support document. You're going to select the document type. Here I've selected the NIH Biosketch. I've given it a name, Devino CV 2025. And then notice that I can use a couple of external sources if I would like to. I can pull from my ERA Commons account. I can use my ORCID ID data. Under the data source, I can use external. Underneath of what you see here with the pull-out menu, I could also start from an existing document. So let's suppose that spring comes along and I want to add a new publication, but I don't want to lose this version of my CV. I can call it, June 2025. I can also start from a completely blank document. Much easier, I think, to start from existing or external. That's why we want to have our stuff fully populated, and then just click Create to generate the document. Once you generate the document, it starts to look an awful lot like an NIH Biosketch. Your name at the top along with your Commons ID. If you linked your ORCID ID, that's going to sit there as well. The education and training that you see here, my terminal degree shows up in my NIH Biosketch, mainly the degree and year, but not the details. Those details are being pulled from the ORCID ID. I loaded only the last 10 years of positions. You can have your full CV if you choose. And again, it's loaded my recent positions from ORCID. Now, I can also, if I don't have it in ORCID, I could add another entry. I could add those right here if I choose to. Better that I go back to ORCID and fully populate that, then I can use it for whatever it's needed for, rather than just have it in this one CV that's difficult to extract. You can also add honors here. You can have them flagged as honors in your ORCID ID or in other places so that you can pull them in flexibly from different sources depending on what you're trying to convey as far as the project. So all of that pulls in. The personal statement is less automated. You can create a personal statement here, and again, that is your qualifications for the research that you are proposing. I don't recommend only keeping it here. What I would recommend is keeping Word docs with 2 or 3 different paragraphs that you may copy and paste to put in here. Under citations, you can either choose from the NCBI, My Bibliography, if you've populated that, or it's auto-populated from PubMed, or if you have put your works into the ORCID ID, you can also pull them from there. You can also put all of those non-PubMed things into My Bibliography as you choose, but you can select your citations and you can pull from either one of those sources. So again, pre-populate your data, then you've got buckets that are full, and you just choose what you want out of each bucket. In the contributions to science area, you can also pull in your citations from those same sources. What's confusing here is that in the citation section, it says, please include up to 4 that are relevant, but contributions to science, you can choose up to 5. So besides publications, if you want to do 5, it's going to have to be something other than a publication. You'll do them one at a time, but then you can rearrange the tabs to decide the order in which they're going to appear on your CV, which is a useful function. If you don't like what you're doing and you like what it looks like in your CV, you could manually redo that, but come back in here and rearrange your tabs instead to get your presentation the way that you'd like it. Just a couple of comments about citations and sources. My bibliography is going to populate from PubMed plus anything you added manually. The ORCID can pull from more sources and repositories. If you see that there are things missing, you can go back to your ORCID account. There are options to link to those other sources and then come back to SciENcv and pull them into the Biosketch or the other documents. So you're not limited. But once you start a CV, if you go back to ORCID, you're going to have to then regenerate that same CV. Once it's going, it will only pull from what was there when it was started. If you don't like what is there, you can go back and add it to the bucket and then come forward. When you get all the way done, at the bottom right-hand corner in teeny tiny little letters, there are 3 file format options for exporting the final product. You can export it as a PDF, and just as a reminder, be sure to save that as a flattened file for submission to NIH. If you download it as a Word, then you can make minor tweaks to it, but you're still going to have to put those tweaks back up into the online Biosketch before producing it for NIH. Once they go live with the mandatory SciENcv usage, you're going to have to download as a PDF from SciENcv in order to use it in the proposal. That file is going to include code that the NIH system recognizes. And so if you just make your own PDF out of a Word document, you're going to get an error message that CV or Biosketch is not going to be accepted as part of your proposal. And if even one of the named individuals on your project does that, you'll have that same issue. And then you've got to figure out whose is in error and get them to fix it, sometimes in the matter of hours, if it's close to deadline. So definitely good to have those done in advance. And again, OSPA and my office will keep people informed when we hear about a new go live date for the NIH mandatory use of SciENcv. Currently, it's on hold. Just a sidebar here, again, other support is not currently available in the SciENcv system. And SciENcv currently supports NSF current and pending support. You can use an existing document or start with a blank document. The blank document can pull from all of the sources that you normally would, but you'll choose what you have. If you don't have an existing document, obviously you're going to need to start with a new one. For the, and I don't have it shown here, but for the other, the current pending support at NSF, the header is going to auto-populate. The other sections are going to combine some manual and database driven work, unless it's a save as from a prior version. Some of the things like the title and the major goals may pull in. The effort and those person months is going to be manual. And part of the reason for that is that, number one, it's not really in the grant anywhere other than built into the detail of your of your budget, but it may change from time to time. So even what was in the original budget of a certain amount of effort may have evolved over time. Either they reduced the funding, you needed to spend less time or spend more time on something. So you are going to have to be manually managing those. And your pre-award folks can help, or even post-award can help you to convert your effort reports and percentages into person months based on whether it was in the summer or academic year or the calendar year. Again, the other two sections besides the header are going to have to be manually entered. The proposals and active projects and the in-kind contributions are going to be manual. Status of projects, anything pending, if it hasn't been funded yet, it is not anywhere in any federal system, and you're going to have to enter that manually, just like you do any pending proposal in a current NSF pending support, current and pending form. So a lot of manual still to be done, but at least it keeps it all in one place. Now, for the faculty, I would strongly recommend that you delegate someone to access your account, whether it's pre-award, post-award, one of your research coordinators. If you navigate to the MyNCBI dashboard and click on your email, that account access icon in the upper right corner, select account settings, scroll down the page to the delegates section. This is where you can add a delegate. What you do there is just simply enter the email address of the delegate. It's not like it's going to be pulling from somebody that's already got in MyNCB account. The delegate will receive an email and will need to activate the account in order to gain access to your materials. They will also need to register a MyNCBI account. And I pulled again those two screens from earlier where Dr. Arias had already delegated me for her bibliography, as well as for her CV, as you can see down here, delegated for one of those. So we've got lots of options for managing all of our data. You really have to just get in there. And I would say allow 2 to 3 hours to get all of your stuff populated. If you don't have either one of these accounts already set up, the ORCID or the My Bibliography or the My NCBI. All of those will be sources for your data. Time up front will save you lots and lots of time in the long run. If you are more senior in your career, you have lots to enter. If you are just getting started in your research career, this is a great place to begin. And then you can be adding to it on a regular basis across your career. Near the end of the presentation, I have quite a few links for different resources here. You've got the overview video for My NCBI. There are also YouTube channels for My NCBI and for ORCID. So you can, if you prefer to watch videos, you're welcome to do that. There are help functions. They remind me very much of the ERA Commons help pages for the My NCBI bibliography, the SciENcv help. The ORCID Help Center is also readily available. There's a help link on the bottom of most pages on ORCID. And then again, if you prefer the video views, then there is a whole library full of video tutorials. I believe, so the NCBI plays off of YouTube, ORCID plays off of Vimeo, but they launch just fine within a regular browser. So you don't need to install anything new to be able to play the ORCID videos. And so that's kind of an overview of how the system works, what you need to do to get going on it. And so again, I thank you for joining today's presentation. I was aiming at about 45 minutes, but I can stay longer to answer any questions that you have. I don't see questions that have been put in the Q&A other than the early ones about you froze. But please take a moment to enter any questions in the chat, and I will take a moment to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I'll make a note of it and get back to you. Is there a way that I can... Okay, so Dan asks a question, what is the best way to keep up with any changes to these systems? I would say consult with your pre-award person. We will be monitoring those and subscribing to the updates for these so that you are notified of changes. And each of them has a mailing list option that none of us, of course, get nearly enough emails. So if you need one more listserv coming at you, or that ORSP staff will be monitoring those and communicating as they go, especially anything that we hear about the go live on the NIH side. And thanks again for coming. I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar and close the chat, but please watch for information regarding the recording and or updates on these systems as Dan has asked. Thanks a lot and have a great day.